Ani nindo e maganatak nikagwe kitimagas vini sekwe to go makwendo dem gawa babani kagish kanagining and dunjiba. I'm introducing myself in Anishinaabe, and I'm from the White Earth Reservation, which is in northern Minnesota. Y'all know where Minnesota is? Very good. I'm from between, let's say, Bemidji and Fargo, but northwestern Minnesota. Good? All right. My parents live in Ashland, Oregon. Some of you might know my mother. I'll see there's some notes. Those are old, though. Betty LaDuke. So I spent a lot of time in Oregon, and I spent a lot of time in this region. But I'm very honored to be here tonight, and I'm the beginning of a big road trip, I have to tell you. So I have to apologize, I didn't bring a lot of books. I brought this, which I'm going to be talking about, which is a new publication we have called Sustainable Travel Communities, and I have a few copies of it, but you can download it for free as a PDF off of our website, Honor the Earth. I just wanted to say, but the reason I'm giving you this explanation is that I'm going on a long road trip, and I can't carry as much stuff as I thought I could. So that's what I was going to say. But I'm on my way to go see this woman named Deb Echohawk, and I'm going to tell you about her to start with. I met her, I met her a couple times, but I met her when I was in Oklahoma last time, and I'm going to Oklahoma to see her after this. And she's a keeper of the Pawnee seeds. And I met her, and I was talking about the issues I'm going to talk with you about tonight. And she said to me, she talked to me, and she said, we have our corn seeds, we have all our seeds, and we had them in our bundles. And we are sacred seeds, and we're growing them out. She said, we're growing out our seeds, our really old seeds, and are really important to our community. She said, but what she said is that the Pawnee didn't used to live in Oklahoma. The Pawnee used to live in Nebraska. And they were forced by the military to move to Oklahoma. And so she said that they went to find these people in, I think how you call it is Kearney, Nebraska. I haven't been there yet. But she said that's where they were from originally. And she said they went back there, and when they returned there, that those farmers that were there, they're not Pawnees, but they cried when they saw those Pawnees returning, because they said that they had missed them, and they would like to see them come back. And I believe actually that some land was just returned to the Pawnee near Kearney. But she said that they came back and they brought their corn seeds back to Kearney, Nebraska. And those farmers grow those corn seeds for those people there, for the Pawnee. And then they have a big celebration. And she said that the seeds that are grown in Nebraska, the corn that is grown in Nebraska, grows much better than the corn that they are growing in Oklahoma. And it's the same seed. And what she said is, she said that the seeds remember the earth from which they came, which I thought was a really interesting thing to think about. And it's part of what I'm working on now. I'm going to go talk to her about her story and what they're doing, but we're working on trying to recover these really old seeds and to grow them out. Because in the times that we are facing of climate change and peak oil and the issues around food security, we believe that these are the way to go. Some of these really old seeds, because they're more diverse and they're strong. And in my travels, I met this other guy. His name is Whit Davis, and he's about 85. And he lives in Connecticut. He's kind of old Yankee. And I had kind of read about him, and I finally tracked him down through some, nephew or something, and I, get out there to his place. It's this old farmstead, and I talked to this guy, and he is telling me about this corn he is growing. And it's, he said, he tells me this story, his great, his ancestor, we'll just go with that, very long time ago, was a guy named John Stanton. And he had come over on a boat from England, and he went to Virginia, and he began living there a long time ago in the 1600s. And he lived there, and then he continued to move up the coast, and he became familiar with a lot of the Narragansett and the other people, the Algonquin speakers in that region. So he moved to Connecticut, and when he moved to Connecticut, they had what was known as the Pequot Wars. And in that area, it was very, ruthless. The Puritans were ruthless. with those people. And Uncas, who was one of the chiefs of the Pequots, became friends with this man's ancestor. And in becoming friends, he was a translator for Uncas, and in fact, upon his passing, had written his will for him, and had written a lot of his papers in English. But they became to be good friends. And he said that Uncas gave his family some corn. And for 300 years, that family has grown that corn. And so I wanted to tell you those stories because I believe in people, because I believe in the goodness of people. And I think that somehow in this resilience of seeds that are 300 years old, he gave me some of that corn, and I don't know if it likes the land where I live as much as it likes the land where he lives. But I like the fact that somebody kept a commitment to do something over all those years, and every year he and his girlfriend, they make Johnny cakes for the Narragansetts and the Mohegans. And they cook that corn, and they have a feast with that community to celebrate the relationship between their family and those communities for all those years. So that is a little bit about how you make a durable and sustainable society, in my assessment. You have a set of relations which, exist over time. They are sometimes tarnished and sometimes recovered, but you got a shot at it. So in telling you those stories, I'm going to ask you to think about how we make a society that is more at peace. And I think that involves some deconstructing of where we are. I have to be honest. In Anishinaabe-Moan, this month here is called Anabonageesis. Anabonageesis. That's my favorite moon because I like how it sounds. Anabonageesis. It means a hard-crusted snow moon. I don't know if you know what that means, but I think so. It's when it snows and then it thaws and it freezes again. And you get a hard crust on the snow, right? It's also the moon. You don't want to do a face plant in the snow. And this moon is followed by a moon, maple syruping moon. And then we have a moon called Wabaganageesis, which is a flower moon, followed by Odamanageesis, a strawberry moon, followed by Meangeesis, which is a blueberry moon. Then we have a moon that is called Menominikegeesis, a wild rice making moon. That's what it's called. And that's when we go out on our lakes and harvest our rice. And then we have one that's called Watebagageesis, when the leaves change color. Then we have one called Benakweogeesis, which is when the leaves fall. Then we have a moon called Gashkadnogeesis, which is when it freezes. Manadugeesis, little spirit moon, Giji Manadugeesis, a great spirit moon, and then the Maybidageesis, that's called a sucker moon, or when the suckerfish, it refers to the suckerfish. Now, I know you're probably wondering why I told you all those moons. But I told you them because I was wondering if you noticed that none of those moons is named after a Roman emperor. Did you see that? It's possible to have an entire worldview that has nothing to do with the Roman emperor. And it's actually, it's okay. I just want you to know that's okay. Because I think that is a little bit of what we need to look at. Because what I will make is a suggestion to you that a society that is based on conquest, society that is based on empire, is really not sustainable over the long haul. You don't got a good shot at having good relations with anybody, And so you got to do a little bit of rethinking. So let me talk about a little where we are here, and I'm not going to go into it too much. I'm going to see how my little PowerPoint does here. I don't think you guys need a long lecture on climate change. Are you guys good? Do you realize we already raised the temperature 1 degree? We're on our way to 2. This is not a good thing. This is Kivalina. Up in Alaska, it has fallen into the ocean. This village sued 14 oil companies and 14 power companies, 7 oil companies, and a coal company because they're falling in the ocean. And this, there's a whole bunch of native communities up there on the North Shore. They say $400 million to relocate this one. And there's about 180 villages you're looking at that have got similar impacts. I don't know what the price tag is for climate change. You know, I don't know who's in charge of that accounting. They're saying by 2020 it's going to be 20% of world GDP. Is what it's going to cost us between the health impacts, right? The disaster-related impacts. And then what is the quantifiable, how do you quantify the loss of a homeland? Tuvalu, some of these islands in the Pacific, going under. Like, what's the price tag on that one? These are called the death maps, is what these are called. This is the costs, some of the impacts, but over here on the your right, this is called the, these are morbidity rates associated with climate change. And a lot of those have to do with poverty. The Great Plains has a lot to do with the fact that 30% of the people live in trailers. And a lot of them live remotely. If you know your reservations, you know, up at a point in northern Minnesota that's right over by Grand Portage Reservation. You got kind of a combination of, looks like Cheyenne River is what you're looking at in South Dakota, and you got Standing Rock in North Dakota. That's what you're looking at. You know, these communities that are impacted, they are native communities, but they're just communities that are poor and they don't have phones, and they're remotely located, and they don't have good heating systems, they don't have backup plan B. That's why you got a morbidity rate that looks like that. You got the second issue that intersects with this that I don't want to bum you all out about. I bummed out my son just hit 19, but I had to break it to him before he could drive that I'd consumed half the world's known oil resources. So I said, I don't know what the point is. But, you know, that's what's known. There's oil out there, you know. That's 20,000 feet below the icebergs up in Alaska. Go ahead. You know, I mean, Conoco and these other companies are really proud of their new breakthroughs. Offshore oil, you know, you send down in the bottom of the sea, you know, the crack in the bottom of the sea in China probably, right? There's, you know, oil reserves in countries that might not actually want to give us the oil. And it turns out that you can only invade so many countries. You got a very expensive war right now. And you can't maintain that level of intervention to get oil. And then, of course, there is the oil in the tar sands in Alberta, which is the next great plan, which is a really bad one. And in that in itself, it takes, you know, you're mining an area basically the size of, that's what it looks like, you're mining an area basically the size of Florida by the time they're done. And squeezing sand into oil, in the process devastating an entire ecosystem, using way too much water and putting a whole bunch of arsenic, mercury, and other chemicals into the environment. That would never pass an environmental impact statement anywhere. But Alberta doesn't have environmental laws, really, that protect anything. And all those pipelines are coming here. Alberta is not producing oil for Alberta. It's producing for the largest fossil fuels and energy economy in the world, being ours, right? So there is oil. The price tag's pretty high. Oh, this is the other answer that's proposing for climate change, which is the reboot. I think, what is it, a $56 billion in loan guarantees that we're looking at right now? The new proposal for the nuclear industry reboot. Have you guys been watching this? You know, it was a bad idea for 30 years. A lot of you, I don't know, some of you were probably involved. Remember the WHOOPS? That was a great acronym, wasn't it? Washington Public Power Supply, right? WHOOPS. I always like those acronyms. For the nuclear power plants out here. A lot of us were involved in the last round of fighting the nuclear power plants because it was a really bad way to boil water. You know, a lot of radiation, contamination. If nuclear power is the answer to climate change, I want to know what the question was. You know, was the question, do you want to have more radiation impact? You want to make sure there's plenty of DU available for the U.S. military. You know, do you want to make sure that you got to really maintain the same concentration of power in your utility industry? Do you want to have a really huge set of cost overruns that are going to be paid for by taxpayers? Do you want to create an industry that you don't have a solution on what to do with the waste? You know, that's why for 30 years we haven't been putting in new nuclear power plants. And because people like myself and probably a lot of you put our bodies on the line, you know, and fought. For our native communities, it is a huge impact because they're just trying to open up, I think they did in December, they opened up a uranium mine on the north side of the Grand Canyon, right? Called the Red Butte Mine. And I'm thinking one place, you know, at one point I read this Onion, you know the Onion? One time I read this article in the Onion and I thought it was true, which is by mistake, but was that they wanted to mine coal in the backside of Mount Rushmore. It sounded plausible at the time, but mining uranium at the Grand Canyon is somewhat similar to that. I'm opposed to uranium mining, but it seems like that is rather a national icon, aside from being the mother canyon. The third issue that I wanted to address just briefly is that of food security. Food security is very heavily tied to the issues of climate change and the issues of peak oil. This is just a little chart, how far your food travels. Average meal travels 1,546 miles from producer to table. Now here in the Northwest, you have a shorter distance. But those kiwis that are coming in from New Zealand, you know, and all that fruit coming in from Chile is coming pretty far. In any case, that's the reality of the situation we have. The second element of that is that industrialized agriculture contributes, it's estimated, at least 25% of CO2 emissions through both deforestation and the transport of food, and the fact that what you're not, you no longer are adding carbon to your topsoil. In fact, you're removing it. You're mining your topsoil in this country. The third element of this is that it is in fact oil dependent. You know, the reality is that we're in this place where after the Green Revolution, we're reaching saturation in terms of the amount of chemicals and the return you're going to get per chemical on your food system. That is to say that you can only put so much on, and both the root systems are incapable of absorbing the amount of chemicals we're putting on, and so that is why we have dead zones at the Gulf of Mexico, right? The second thing is that at a certain point, your returns aren't as good. And so they call it the saturation point with petroleum-based additives in your agricultural system. And the reality is that at this point we're probably putting between 10 and 15 calories of energy in to produce 1 calorie of food, which is a really grossly inefficient way to produce your food. Add to that the other elements of the food security crisis that we are facing, aside from peak oil and climate change. Add in there the concentration of ownership of seeds and food in this country, whether it is the patenting of seeds by Monsanto and DuPont, or the increasing concentration for many years of the agricultural industry in this country. And then the additional ownership of genetic material by the food industry and the shrinking of the diversity with the latest proposals. They are not that new, but the proposals over the last decade for the genetic engineering of the world food chain. Any sense of looking at history would teach you that what you want is diversity, not a monocrop. Your shot at resilience is based on that. It is not based on concentration of ownership and concentration of diversity. So this is what you do if you are us. This is how you fight climate change. Is you do your damnedest to fight them. There's 2 power plants that this last year in 2009. Well, one of them at least we defeated. Number 2 is pretty close. We aren't going to claim credit for it yet. But the first one is, if you want to deal with climate change, you got to deal with coal. You can't just pretend, and you can't talk about it. You got to fight coal plants, because every time you put up more wind turbines in this country, it's fantastic. But you put up some wind turbines and they put up one more coal plant, you still got a problem, right? There's no way around it. Coal is dirty. Coal's got to be over. So this shot on the top left and the top right there is a coal-fired power plant that we just defeated in South Dakota. It's called Big Stone 2. And it's about a 10-year battle, at least a 10-year battle. And I'm just saying that to you, some of you are young, well, some of you are my age and some of you are not, but it takes a while to beat these things. A lot of people want something to be fixed overnight. It does not get fixed overnight. It does not get fixed in one grant year, if you're fighting it and you're working in a nonprofit organization. It takes a long time to defeat these facilities, and you got to pray hard and you got to work hard, But Big Stone 2 is started out as a 1,000 megawatt coal-fired power plant to the west of our reservation, and it was using lignite coal from North Dakota, which is just above burning dirt. We already have huge problems in our region with mercury contamination of our lakes. And besides that, it was inefficient because, as you likely know, one of the best wind regimes in the country is in North and South Dakota. So we just thought it was a dumb idea. So we started battling them. A lot of groups battled them. And we end up, there's a town just south of my reservation called Fergus Falls. And it's kind of a little redneck town, let's just be honest. And in that town, they have, is the headquarters of Otter Tail Power Company, which is the utility that was proposing this coal plant. And, they had, it's an investor-owned utility, but a lot of investors are local, and it was kind of hometown. I don't know the equivalent out here in the Northwest, but let's just say they control that town. And so we started go down there, and actually some students from a college came up, Fergus Falls Community College, and they came up to see me, and they asked if I would, they had a social justice class, and asked if I would teach them, like a session. I said, how about this? How about you help me organize a forum in Fergus Falls on this Big Stone 2 power plant? Which I thought would be a good lesson. So I taught them how to write a press release. I taught them how to do a little bit of corporate research. I taught them how to do some outreach, go to the churches. Taught them how to put on an event, and that professor almost got fired. I was thinking, well, what is freedom of speech, We were trying to organize a debate between the power company and the Native people, because they had never informed the Native people, the Sisseton, Wahpeton, Dakota Nation, whose water they were using and who was directly downwind. They had never once talked to them. And Sisseton, Dakota wanted to come to their town. Wanted to come right to the hometown of Otter Tail Power and say, we would like to say no, And so we had this event. It was a very controversial event. But you see, I'm actually a pretty nice person. I didn't, it was, but the power company, we did have the event in the end, but it wasn't as we had projected because the power company would not show. And in fact, the only way they would have showed is if they had the moderator instead of the school. And I said, that's not fair. I said, the school gets to be, you understand what I'm saying? Is that you don't get to be the team that gets to control the terrain. The school gets to be the, a debate. Gets to be like that, So then they didn't come. But so then later on, we had a couple other events there, and then they had their utility had a meeting there. And in the meantime, what happened is that the power company lost its contracts because Minnesota, like the Northwest, has renewable energy portfolios, and you can't fill your renewable energy portfolio with coal. And so the original contract was for, the original investors were financing a 1,000 megawatt power plant. It ended up being 500 megawatts. So they were losing their investors, right? And they're cutting it back. It's getting smaller and smaller, and they're out there ready to go to the mat. And so we go down there to the stockholders meeting in Fergus Falls. And I just have to tell you, so we say we're going to go to the stockholders meeting, and Untitled Power issues this press release, and there's in the Fergus Falls paper, they said dissidents and protesters are going to come to the stockholders meeting, and so they have all these cops, and all these security show up, and it's at the Holiday Inn in Fergus Falls, right? And we go down there, and I just want to point out to you, this is who the protesters were, right? So there's this lady from the Sierra Club, Seisha. I think she actually moved out here, and she's fighting coal plants out here. She works for Sierra Club. And then right next to her is Peggy, I think her last name's Peterson from Sisseton, Wapaton. That little short guy in the middle, that's my son. He's on his field trip from school. He spends a lot of time going on road trips with his mom from school. And he has little, his name's, what?
He's pretty scary.
Yeah, he's scary, he's scary. His name is Gway Conamut. It means when the wind shifts. That's Gway. And so he's got this sign that says First Nations people don't want to be poisoned or something like that, right? And then next to him is me. See, there's me. And then next to him is this guy dressed as a giant otter, So I just want to point out that, we were really a daunting resistance, So after that, the giant otter and I went and met with the utility. And we explained to them that, they're explaining to us they're really proud that they have this plan, and they have a 12-year-old plan. I said, that's your problem. You got a 12-year-old plan. That was before anybody knew anything about climate change. The price of carbon is high. You're not going to be able to sell your power, on the market. And you're not dealing with any mitigation, and before then you never informed the Native community, and you got their water rights, So about a month or two later, the rest of the investors fall out. And that's how that power plant ended up, there's a lot of people worked on that, And I just want to say, that's what if you want to deal with climate change, you can't just, you can't stick your head in the sand. You got to oppose these bad ideas, And then the second one here is this other one we're working on in the Southwest. This is called Desert Rock. They just got an adverse ruling by the EPA because, it's a 1,200, I believe, a 1,200 megawatt coal-fired power plant on the Navajo Reservation. It's clean coal is what they say, but there's no such thing as clean coal. That's an oxymoron because you have to mine it, and that's not clean. And in this case, you have to pump the water a mile below the surface. So I was wondering about the energy equation of pumping water from that deep up to a coal plant. In the meantime, all the Navajo households around there have to haul their water in 55-gallon drums. So to me, the irony that a coal plant gets water pumping facilities paid for, right? In the meantime, Navajo grandmas, they're just community, has to haul their own darn water. That just seems incredibly unjust. So that's what we're trying to do is, we fight these things and these guys. And then this is our alternative. This is for Desert Rock, but in this suggestion, we're proposing in the Southwest, there was a recent closure of a coal-fired power plant called the Mojave Generating Station in 2005. This one is also being proposed, and then finally, we have a similar proposal for our Big Stone area, which is to say that the jobs that are displaced and the income and the electricity that is displaced can best be served by moving into a renewable economy. And so this is called the Just Transition Strategy, and this was forwarded by Dene Citizens for Protecting the Environment. Then this is the issue that you have to deal with, is that not only do you have to fight the bad proposals, but in addition to that, you have to fight the fact that this is the single most inefficient energy economy in the world. I hope that you're all aware of this, right? They say that the amount of power that we waste is the equivalent to the amount of power used by the country of Japan. And that's just out of our facilities in themselves, our coal and our present power facilities, because many of them are just incredibly inefficient. But between point of origin and point of consumption, in general, if you look at this chart, you're losing about 2/3 at least, half to 2/3 of the power. And that is because the economy of scale, which is to say big is not always best. Local can be more efficient. And so I say that to you because in rethinking where we are going, those are going to be essential parts of the strategy. So let me just talk a little bit about where it is that we think it is worth considering going. First of all, I kind of gave you a technical lecture on energy and food a little bit. But in the bigger picture, the question I have to ask is that these are symptoms of a larger set of problems. And those problems have to do with how we view, in part, in my belief, or in the belief I think of a lot of other people, how we view our place in the world and how we view our entitlement to the world. And the fact that we could create a society which is so wasteful in itself says something about how we view what we are righteously due. So let me ask you to consider rethinking our position. That's what I would ask. And I told you a little bit about, the idea of living in a society that is a little bit post-empire. Let me talk about what that looks like in terms of theory, and then I'm going to talk about what it looks like in terms of practice. Let us consider rethinking a paradigm. If we agree, or at least we agree to consider that perhaps the construct of empire is unsustainable, is it possible to rethink a society from that basis? I spent a lot of time in school, and I know that in general, indigenous thinking is not viewed as on par with thinking that comes from Western Europe. I'm onto this. It's illustrated perhaps best by the fact when I was an undergraduate at Harvard, if you wanted to study art from Europe, you went to fine arts. If you wanted to study art from Native America, you went to anthropology. Right? So what does that say? It says some people's art is valued, some people's art is looked at as an object, right? And across the board, you will find that in general, indigenous thinking is viewed as folkloric. It's viewed as something which one brings out in your multicultural days to kind of flavor, in general, a Eurocentric education without being overly judgmental. But I spent a lot of time in school. And so in that, one of the challenges I think we face is that we are at a certain place in time. We are in this new millennium. And I am someone that believes that given the circumstances we are facing, if you dig yourself into a hole, at some point you might want to quit digging. And look where you are. Because I'm pretty sure that the thoughts and the paradigm that got us here may not be the way to get us out. But it takes a bit of courage to admit that. And all societies, nobody has a monopoly on botching things up. We're human. And in all of our indigenous traditions, or I know in our Anishinaabe tradition, we botch some things up seriously. The question is really is if you have the humility to reconsider where you are, and then the commitment to do something about it. So what does an indigenous paradigm look like? Let me just tell you kind of my sense on things from where I look, my little house in northern Minnesota. And I don't know, all things about indigenous thinking, but I know that this, from my community, is something like this. We have a teaching that is Gichi-Tibwewin, or the Great Law. That's what we say. Minubamata Ziwin is what we are after, which is the good life. And in order to acquire the good life, you must try to live by the Great Law. And in our perception, the Great Law is that essentially the Creator's law is the highest law, higher than the laws made by nations, states, or municipalities, and one would do well to live in accordance with the Creator's law. What does the Creator's law teach us? We are taught, for instance, Nindinawe Maganaduk, that we are all related. What does that mean? That means that, all of us are 99.9% the same to start with, right? Which I know really bummed out the white supremacists. But we're all pretty close, right? But beyond that, You know, in our teachings and in our cultural traditions, we recognize our relatives as having wings and fins, hands, paws, hooves, and roots. We recognize that we as the humans are the most dependent. They don't need us. They do not need us, actually, but we need them. That a respectful set of relations is a really good idea, given those circumstances. And that some of our greatest teachings, a lot of our greatest teachings come from our relatives. We believe in our teachings that in Anishinaabe, in our teachings, but a lot of other indigenous teachings, is that it is called cyclical thinking, which is to say that it's our understanding that that which is natural is cyclical. The moons, the tides, the seasons, our bodies themselves are cyclical. I recited to you the months in Anishinaabe-Moan in Ojibwe teachings. And you see that those relate to place. They relate to time and place in a cyclical manner. And so we have observed that generally one would do well to live in accordance with those cycles. And then we have a teaching that is about the future, apane, for forever. And it's perhaps said best by the Iroquois Confederacy, who said that, in their teachings, the way it is put best perhaps is, in each deliberation, consider the impact upon the seventh generation from now. In each deliberation, consider the impact upon the seventh generation from now. Which is, I would say, a pono, or righteous teaching. Because they are not actually here. We're their best shot. So when we consider how much tar sands to squeeze out of Alberta, might consider the impact ahead. Nuclear power, there's not actually a way to formulate the impact on those generations ahead. Only to know that we have it. So we're the ones that have a shot of doing the right thing. Having said that, that contrasts entirely with what I would call industrial thinking. Instead of believing that the Creator's law is the highest law, we live in a society which believes that man's laws are the highest laws. That is illustrated by the Columbia River. The perceptions that are in Western water basins that you can allocate and over-allocate water in a Western water basin until there is no water available for fish. Or you can trade pollution credits. And somehow you're going to come out even on that one. Those are examples of believing, or you can change regulations according to who's in power and who has the most influence. And set risk assessments based on a set of values and money. Instead of believing that we are all related, we are very anthropocentric. Humans consume most of the biosphere, leaving our relatives as paupers. Try being a buffalo in Yellowstone National Park and you'll see what it is to be a pauper. You go outside the park and you're shot. That's what Montana Department of Livestock will do. Or try being a salmon in the river. You're just trying to hang in there because we have consumed the river. We do not consider, we consider that we are somehow better and that we are not impacted. Instead of having a cyclical worldview, we live in a very linear worldview society. A couple of really good examples of that are economic. They are a couple of the largest growth industries in this country. One would be waste management. That's a snapshot of a linear economy. How many of you have seen this movie by Annie Leonard called The Story of Stuff? Have any of you seen this movie? Right. So that exemplifies, right? And I don't remember her figure, but I think it's something like within about 3 months, some 90% or so of what we buy, we're tossing. I mean, we are a society which is based on consumption. 70% of the economy is based on consumption, which is not, over the long haul, probably the best plan for an economy. Because the other side of consumption in this society is disposal. So we got about 50 trillion pounds of waste a year, not including wastewater, which I cannot conceptually understand. Right? And so then you spend your time trying to send your waste someplace. If you're a small town, you know, in my introduction, as you know, I was inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame. And at my induction on the way in, you know that my induction was sponsored by Waste Management. It's really, really ironic. And as you're driving down to the site, they have these huge hills. And they are not landfills, they're land hills, right? That's what they look like, right? That is, you know, a huge growth industry in this country. And then we have the social production of waste. And that is the prison industrial complex. Because we live in a country which has more people per capita in prison than any other country in the world. And that is a growth industry. And so of the 9 million prisoners in the world, 2.1 million are in the United States. 2.1 million of the 9 million prisoners in the world are in the United States. And that, in my humble estimation, would not be something one would aspire to. The social production of waste. And over the long haul, that is not sustainable either. To imprison more and more people. And to have that be an industry. And then the question of if we think generations ahead, we do not. You know, by and large, I mean, Exxon this last year did not make their profits of the year before. But we live in a society which is sometimes based on fiscal years, quite often based on quarters, in terms of its thinking. Quarterly profits. And those have huge implications for long-term sustainability. So the suggestion that I give to you is that perhaps it is worth rethinking that paradigm, because I believe that those elements are unsustainable and do not represent a durable society. So let me talk a little bit about what our plan is in our community. I just co-hosted a conference on climate change in Minnesota, and it was a powerful time that we had. But in that, we talked about where we were going and who were the people that were going to be doing that. You know, what we realized is that the same thing we realize in our community is we look around and, you know, you could wait for someone to save you, but you might be waiting a while. And so in my own community, we looked around and we realized on my own reservation that we might not be the smartest, we might not be the richest, but, you know, we're the ones who live there. And so rather than kvetch, I always like that Yiddish word kvetch. You ever hear that one? So they complain and complain and complain. You know, why don't we just work on it? So this here is, I bought this piece of art. I don't know if any of you know this story, but my house burned down about 1.5 years ago. And so I bought this piece of art. And I actually built a wall for this. I was like, I have this. But anyway, this is from a guy from my community. His name is Nagani Benes. He's an old chief. And this piece of art is by this guy named Jonathan Thunder. And I had him redo it a little bit, and I put those wind turbines in there. He just had a cool window before, but I said, I like how in the poster, in the original it does not. But this is how we are connected between here and there. So this is what we are working on in our community. In terms of energy and peak oil, you know, I have the privilege of directing an organization for 20 years, White Earth Land Recovery Project, and I say that again to you because things take time. You know, it's pretty much my life's work. People ask me how things are going, what's new. I'm like, you know, pretty much working on it. It takes a while, you know. Since I got out of college, I worked in my community, and probably since before some of you were born, but that's what we're trying to do. So my organization, as a grassroots organization, is not the government, it's not the tribal government. But I believe in citizen activism. I believe you have a right and a responsibility to take care of your future. That's what I believe. You know, and as I said, if you wait for someone else, it's not going to happen. So we bought land back on my reservation, about 1,400 acres, including some places where we grow food, and then we bought a school a couple years ago, because they closed down schools in rural areas. And so in this case, the school was, in 2003, they won the No Child Left Behind Award. 2004, they put $1.5 million in renovations into the school. 2005, they closed the school. In 2006, they sold the school to us for $250,000. There you go. That's how that works. So I got a USDA certified food processing facility in there. I got offices for a number of the nonprofits on our reservation. Boys and Girls Club at a daycare. That's Ojibwe centric. And so this is some of our work on renewable energy, what we're trying to do here. In order to, you fight the bad guys and then you make the alternative. So we did a study on our reservation and we documented what was going on with our energy system. We found that my tribe spends about a quarter of its money on energy. And we don't own any dinosaurs. The U.S. spends about 1/5. An industrialized country spends 1/5 of its income on energy. And the problem with energy, the problem with that formula is that by and large, whether it is oil or in this case our reservation, we don't own any dinosaurs. It's all imported. So it's structurally like a hole in your economy that represents a quarter of your economy, if you understand what I'm saying. You got about 50% unemployment on the reservation and you're spending a quarter of your money on energy, buying it from outsiders. And facing the issues of peak oil, it does not look like those prices are going to be going down anytime soon, right? So we decide that we will look at how to relocalize our energy system. So we go talk to my tribe about this, and you should have seen the look on their face. It was funny. Because the first thing I said, you will appreciate this here, as I said, it's too bad that we just pulled all those wood stoves out of those houses, isn't it? Because we don't own propane, but we own wood. And in the case of my community, you know, you start with weatherization and efficiency, and then you look at your local heat system. And you got two major choices. One is wood. And anybody, how many of you chop wood, or how many of you have wood stoves up here? Is it hard to, is there zoning issues on wood stoves here? Or wood? No? I mean, and you got a lot of wood here too. I don't really know the circumstances, but in our community it would be fine. And the thing about wood, which I think you know, is it's a direct heat. It's pretty good for the BTUs. But the other thing is that if you have a wood pile, you don't need a shrink. Does anybody know this? This is true, right? Because if you have a bad day, you go see the wood pile, you know. It saves you a lot of trouble. It's a lot less expensive than a lot of other options. And I haven't had a lot of success on it recently. My boys have abandoned me in my attempt to, what would you call it, my attempt to the chop off between the mother and the sons, you know. See how you're doing it. But anyway, I tell you that because it's a local source of heat, and you buy it from local people, and so it creates circulation in your local in your fuel economy, which you're not going to get through buying from a multinational which is selling you propane or natural gas, right? That's what I'm pointing it out to you as well. And then the second thing we do is we put these solar heating panels up, and this one here. This is a panel. We're actually putting that up on Yankton Reservation in South Dakota, but you can see the panel behind those people. The solar panel is, you put it on the south-facing wall of a house, and in our area, we're pretty cold in the wintertime. I think you know that, but we still have sun. And the whole northern plains and the whole region has a lot of sun, and so you still can get sun all winter long. And in that, you put this solar heating panel. It costs about $1,200 to put in. You install it, and it can reduce your heating bill by about 20%. You know, and so that combined with, you know, efficiency and weatherization can keep a leak from occurring just in your household heating bill. Yeah. So then the other issues, you know, you are familiar with the issues of transportation, consuming a good chunk of our, you know, energy system, and you don't need me to tell you that we have a train system that basically it's an embarrassment. I think one author called it an embarrassment to Bulgaria. You know, we have dismantled our hope at mass transit and train systems, and over the long haul, you know, reconstituting a system that is not based on using an interstate highway program would be a really good idea, or my favorite mode of mass transit, which is the airplane, you know, which we are the highest rate of airlines in the world, you know, flights. That is actually not a mass transit system, you know, but that is what we use as a mass transit system, is the airline. Highly inefficient transportation system. But the reducing of that, you know, I'm not going to talk about that because that's not really quite my reservation. I'll talk about it a little bit later. But then the other two things, this is a solar panel we're putting up on the Skull Valley Goshute Reservation in Utah. And then those two pictures in the top right are our wind turbine. And I'm putting up a 75 kilowatt Nortank wind turbine just to the north side of my school to power my school. In Minnesota, I could put up a smaller one and have a lot less problems, but I wanted to break the glass ceiling with the Otter Tail Power Company because they're forced to buy from me. And you already saw me in the Otter and everybody last round, so I could go small, but I'd rather go big and do this. And it's a challenge. That's my grandson in the middle there. He's that's Guy Waden. And then that's my friend Tony Tibbetts putting up that turbine. I think Izzy knows him. And this guy he's an interesting fellow. The thing about putting up a wind turbine, I don't know if you know this, it's kind of cool, is if you put up a wind turbine, you do this, you get to say you're having an erection. Isn't that great? So there we are, we're having an erection on White Earth. It's a really big erection. Anyway, the guy putting the turbine up there is my personal, I'd say that's my personal project. That guy, Special Forces. I don't know, any Indian vets in the room here? Well, the highest rate of enlistment is Indians. It's Native people. And there are a hell of a lot of Native vets out there. And this guy is from Rosebud. He's from Rosebud and from Leech Lake Reservation, too. 26 years in the military, Special Forces. Done a lot of things with my tax dollars. Got a lot of training. So he specialized in demolitions. And it turns out if you're in the Special Forces for 26 years and you specialize in demolitions, like taking down dams in Panama and other places, you have a master's in engineering. That turns out I paid for, didn't I? Because they consume, what, a half of the budget? The U.S. military or something like that, right? Pretty close, right? So I said, so you can blow things up. I said, can you build anything? And there he is. He engineered my foundation, and being fearless and somewhat maniacal, he is the one Indian who wanted to do that. And then, of course, he was the one Indian who was on the next level, too. So there you go. But why I told you that, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, is that that's transition. There's a lot of veterans in this country. That's a very important strategy in the transition from the military prison economy to a green economy, is that they have a skill set that needs to be adapted. And then we are growing these foods. This is my friend Ivan Curry. He's got a Lakota squash. And what we did in our community is, aside from looking at the wind and producing enough power for our people, we also are relocalizing our food system. Now, I mentioned this here squash. I haven't done a nutritional analysis on this squash yet, but I know that a lot of these squashes are much higher in nutritional value than what you could buy at the store. These old seeds here, this University of Minnesota study said hominy corn, which is that down at the bottom, is a Bear Island flint corn. is high in carbohydrates and proteins, yields 47% of the RDA of fiber and 33% of the recommended daily value for vitamin B, thiamine, has half the calories of market corn. Auricera squash, that's a different kind, contains 13% of the daily value of fiber, 64% of the recommended daily value of vitamin A, and half the calories and double the calcium and magnesium of the market equivalent. Potawatomi lima beans are low in fat, high in carbohydrates, protein, and B vitamins. They provide 24 grams of fiber per serving, 21 times the antioxidants found in market beans. Isn't that interesting? So I don't know exactly why that is. I'm not a plant breeder. But what I think happened is that in breeding these foods into industrial foods, right, over time, they bred them for durability, like standability, uniformity, right? Beauty, being able to transport 1,400 miles, and somehow they bred out the nutritional value. That's what I think happened. I'm not sure on that, but that's what I think happened. So in our community, we have a real high rate of diabetes. About a third of the people have diabetes. And it turns out then that these kind of foods are better for you. The traditional foods are better for you than anything that is industrialized. And so that's a lot of our work is we grow these foods, and then we have a tribal farm-to-school program in the Pine Point Elementary School, which serves about 60 kids, and then elders, and then the Head Start program. And we have 60 producers for that farm-to-school program. And that's people that's not like farmers necessarily, that's like Mrs. DeWandler who had extra carrots. And so she gave me 20 pounds of carrots, or 20 pounds of cabbage, right? Like that. And so that's what we're doing, is trying to get these local foods in there. The bigger picture of that is that these things, like I had to get this corn, I got it from a seed bank, I got this much. And then now I grow it out, and we got, quite a bit, acres of it. And similarly, with some other varieties, we have this project we're working on regionally, and that's why I'm going to see that woman, Deb Echohawk, because I'm interested in what she's growing and how she's growing it, right? But these seeds are also, these plants, we believe that they're climate change resistant. And why is that? Because that Bear Island flint corn, when I grew it out first time, it's about this tall, and it has big ears. It's kind of like a dwarf or something, But why is it only this tall? Because it doesn't need to be taller, and when it's this tall, it's more resilient in wind shears, right? The Monsanto Roundup Ready corn is this tall. It does not do so well in drought, and it does not do so well with high wind as my corn. The other thing is that these other corns are addicted to fertilizer, chemicals, and irrigation. These other varieties are created for micro climates. Most of them are frost resistant. So the reason I'm telling you that is I know that there's a lot of gardening. Well, you guys have a much longer season out here than I do. But these varieties are very important to bring back, because in the time of climate change, in the time of concentration of ownership of seeds and concentration of genetic diversity, or reduction of genetic diversity, it's a much better idea to have the diversity. This is our rice. We also work to keep this, as mentioned, we've been battling the genetic engineering of wild rice. It's very biologically diverse. This is what our rice harvest looks like. You can see us out on the lake, and then we bring it in, and it fills up your canoe, and we bring it in, we bag it, and then we parch it over a fire. And I'm showing you this because I'm really proud of it. There's some literature outside on our rice if you're interested in our website. There's a couple here, but there's a bunch on the way out if you like it. We're called Native Harvest. But we buy and we market a lot of rice from our reservation, or we try to. But I just want to point out to you these two men. One of them is older, it's an uncle, and the other one is younger. But the average age of a ricer on my reservation is about 24 or 25. And the reason I'm telling you that is those guys are considered to be the most high risk population in the demographic statistics. But these young men are proud of who they are, and they're proud of ricing, you know, and they're good ricers. And so I'm proud of that in our community. And that's also really good food for our people. This is our sugar bush, and we haul sap by hand, and it's our team that's hauling sap, and then it's our hand harvesting, and then our boiler there, and that little guy in the corner is Guy Wade, and the guy that was, you've seen him later on as a protester. This is when he was little. He was stealing sap out of the tree. Have any of you ever seen this kind of art before? It's called ledger art. How many of you have seen this? Okay, I'll just do a little explanation briefly on it. Is that traditionally in the region west of my community, there's a form of art that is like this. It was traditionally on buffalo hides. And you see it maybe at a museum, you know, and they would record historic events. It was called a winter count. And so, for instance, there was a time on the Missouri River when they reported that the snow was higher than the teepees. That's interesting, huh? And I say that because the National Weather Service doesn't have records that go back that far. But we have records of climate change that are longer, right? And then they recorded when people came, or, you know, battles happened, or when smallpox came. It's recorded. So that form of art was winter count. It was drawn in this style. And I commissioned this piece from a man named Michael Horse, because what happened is that then this art became to be known as ledger art, because as Native people from that region were incarcerated at Fort Sill, Fort Robinson, Fort Randall, they did not have buffalo hides, and instead they would draw on ledger pieces. And so there's a lot of art that shows their incarceration, or it shows what they remembered, right? It's a very significant art form. And I'm showing this to you as well because this is not in your fine arts department. But this is an art form that is very significant for North America. And so it was used to record historic events. And so I commissioned this piece to record the erection of our wind turbine and the ceremony that we held in relation to that. And so in this here, this is me right here. Here I am, see? And then this is my nephew, John Shimmick. This is one of our elders, and this is Aurora Conley. But this here is my son, Great Conrad, who's always in trouble. And then this is Tony, the guy who was at the top of the turbine. He's praying. You see that? And then over here you see this guy named Gary Silk. He's from Standing Rock Reservation, and he's singing. It was a horse ceremony. It was the first time we had that horse ceremony on my reservation in many years. Many years. And then we invite people to come, and so the people were watching. There was other Sundancers that were there watching too. But there's 4 flags. This is why I'm pointing this out to you. The flag that is down in the most over there left is a flag that is of the Shakopee, Mdewakanton, Dakota, and they are in southern Minnesota, and they have a really, really big casino, and they're who gave us about half the money for our wind turbine. And so I want to say that because they are really amazing tribe in what they've done. And they're amazingly wealthy because apparently gambling is quite addictive. And then just the one that's further up from that is the Venezuelan flag. And that is because Citgo Petroleum, owned by the Venezuelan government, is who financed our wind turbine too. And I'll tell you that when we took the money, we were called unpatriotic. And I said, I find it ironic to call Native people unpatriotic. And Exxon didn't give us any money for our turbine, I just want to mention, you know. And then the third flag is our tribal flag for our White Earth Reservation, and then the fourth one going down is the Aboriginal flag from Australia. And I put that on there because I like their flag very much, but also because they have a lot of uranium mining and they're opposing. But I did this because this is our history being made today. That's how history is made, is by people. And it is recorded by people. So that's a Michael Horse piece, of art. So the implications, just, in closing, I want to tell you the story of our community. My theory on this is, of course, if we can do it, anybody can do it. I just say that because nobody would gamble on us. We're not the people demographically that one would gamble on. We're not viewed as the ones who would be able to get it together. But it takes time, and we learn as we go. Does it have broader implications? Yeah. I believe that a relocalized, centralized, decentralized strategy for your food and energy systems are going to be essential to building a durable society. Because you build relationships in both of those. You know where your food comes from, and you are respectful to those who produce it, and in fact, you produce some yourself. So you rebuild your own relationship, your own humanity. By growing some of your food, you rebuild your relationships with your relatives. And you circulate that in your own community. Your energy economy is relocalized through, first, efficiency, and second, through a lot of appropriate levels of technology. My wind turbine we are putting up, I had to do a lot of thinking, and I don't have it all down yet. But I tell you what, that turbine can be built with our own indigenous knowledge, plus that repatriated guy from the military, right? But in addition to that, the level of technology and the size means that I don't have to import a crane from Denmark to service it. I can get a crane in a nearby town. It is not so huge, right? And I say that because that's an important consideration in our areas, is how you're going to maintain your economy, right? Not just how you're going to put it up and who's going to control it. And the reality is that a decentralized energy economy is a more democratized power system. Because one of the problems that we have today is that we are the largest and most inefficient energy economy in the world. And we're very addicted. And the problem with this level of addiction, because we all got it, we feel entitled to power. And we feel entitled to gas. And the problem with this level of addiction is that you're basically a junkie. And the problem with junkies is that they do a lot of bad stuff and hang out with dealers. I'm not saying that that's a snapshot critique of the American political system, but let's just say that's one of our problems. We make bad decisions and invade countries. So getting away, first you have to start your 12-step program and say, I am a junkie. I am an addict. And then you got to look at how you cut your addiction. And you got to look at how you make yourself more responsible. The larger implications of that are huge. Transforming the largest and most inefficient energy and food economy in the world, because both of them are incredibly inefficient, to something that is durable and sustainable is a transformation that involves structural adjustment. It involves opportunities for employment, and it involves the opportunity to rebuild relationships in local communities in a way which is durable. Just to meet just to not bake immediately, you got to have 18,500 megawatts a year of new renewables come online. 185,000 in 10 years. That requires a lot of wind. That requires a lot of efficiency. And that rebooting means you could put a lot of people to work in a different way. And in the end, you might end up with something that is a little bit different. There is an index. It's called the Happy Planet Index. Have any of you heard of this? I'm kind of a fan of this. The U.S. did not win the happy country. Didn't win the Happy Country Award recently. Who won it this last year was Costa Rica. And the year before that, standing for a couple years, was Vanuatu. Why did they win it? Because quality of life is different than level of income or level of consumption. Right? If you have good food, if you have good health, if you have good relations, if you don't have a lot of homeless people, if people have security, you have education, prenatal health care, that's quality of life. And that involves kind of a deconstructing and reconfiguring a paradigm. And saying that perhaps level of consumption is not equated with happiness. And in the end, we end up, I think, in a better place, because we are all related. Now I'm going to go off here in about a week. I'm going to go see Deb Echohawk, because I'm really interested in how, after 100 years, you rebuild relations. And I figure if the Pawnees and the settlers of Kearney, Nebraska can do it, I think we all could. That's what I think. Miigwech miyu. Thank you for your time.